At my promotion dinner, my mom said, "Stop showing off your success, your brother deserves this chance." So I told her. Then ask him why he needs me to fail, and watched her reach for her phone. I honestly thought the hardest part of getting promoted was going to be telling my family. I was wrong. The hard part was realizing that my promotion was apparently something my family believed belonged to my younger brother. The dinner was supposed to be simple. My company had promoted me to regional operations manager after almost 8 years of working there. I had started as an entry-level coordinator, spent years doing jobs nobody noticed, took night classes because my employer only covered part of my tuition, and eventually moved into management. It was not some overnight success story. I had missed birthdays because of inventory problems. I had eaten dinner at my desk more times than I could count. I had spent weekends answering emails while my friends were out. I had turned down vacations because I was saving for a down payment. So when I finally got the promotion, I was proud of myself. Not arrogant, just proud. My salary was going from just under $70,000 to a little over $100,000. There was a bonus structure tied to performance, better health insurance, and a company vehicle for certain work trips. I had also been given a small office instead of working from a desk in the middle of the operations floor. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had actually gotten somewhere. I called my parents before I told almost anyone else. My dad congratulated me immediately. My mom paused for a few seconds. Then she congratulated me too. At least that was how I remembered it. I didn't notice anything strange at the time. She asked whether the promotion meant I would be traveling more. I told her probably a little. She asked whether the raise was really as much as I had heard. I hadn't told her the exact number, but I admitted that it was significant. She said she was happy for me. Then she asked whether my brother knew. That should have been the first warning sign. I just didn't recognize it. My younger brother, Daniel, was 28. I was 34. Growing up, we had always been close enough that I never considered us enemies. We fought like brothers. We competed over stupid things. We argued over video games, basketball, chores, and who got the front seat. But there was always an underlying assumption in our family that Daniel would eventually figure things out. I had never really questioned that assumption. I was the responsible one. Daniel was the one who needed time. That was how everyone described us. I was organized. Daniel was spontaneous. I saved money. Daniel lived in the moment. I finished what I started. Daniel needed encouragement. I had never understood how those descriptions slowly became excuses. Daniel had bounced between jobs since graduating high school. He had worked in sales, construction, a car dealership, a warehouse, and briefly for a landscaping company. None of those jobs lasted very long. Every time something went wrong, there was a reason. His manager didn't like him. The hours were terrible. The company was unstable. A coworker was stealing. The commute was too long. He was trying to find something better. My parents always believed him. I usually did too. I had occasionally helped him financially, but not in a way I considered excessive. I paid for a tire replacement once. I loaned him $800 when his apartment security deposit came due. I covered a phone bill when his account was about to be shut off. I also helped him rewrite a resume at one point. I thought I was being a good older brother. I didn't realize I was participating in a system where his problems always eventually became somebody else's responsibility. The promotion dinner happened on a Friday night. My dad picked the restaurant. It was a nice place, but not ridiculously expensive. I had originally planned to pay for everyone because I wanted the dinner to be my treat. My parents arrived first. Daniel came about 15 minutes late. That wasn't unusual. He walked in wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that looked like he had borrowed it from someone. My mom hugged him. My dad shook his hand. I noticed that Daniel didn't congratulate me right away. Instead, he sat down and looked at the menu. I assumed he was just tired. The first 20 minutes were normal. My dad asked about the new position. I explained what I would actually be doing. My mom asked whether the company had given me a signing bonus. I told her there was a promotion bonus, but it depended on performance. Daniel asked whether the new position meant I could work from home more often. I said probably not. Then he asked how much I would be making. I hesitated. I didn't want the conversation to become about money. I gave him a rough number anyway. He nodded. My mom smiled in a way I couldn't quite read. Then she started talking about how quickly life changes. She said it seemed like only yesterday that both of us were kids. She talked about how proud she was that her sons were becoming adults. For a few minutes, everything felt good. Then Daniel mentioned that he was looking for a new job. I asked what kind of work he wanted. He said he was tired of entry-level positions and wanted something with real responsibility. I told him that made sense. Then he mentioned that he had applied for an operations supervisor position at a company in the same industry as mine. I remember putting my fork down. I asked whether he had experience in operations. He said he had some. Technically, he did. He had worked in a warehouse for about 11 months. That was not the same thing as managing operations, but I didn't say that. I told him he should apply anyway. My mom looked at me. She seemed relieved. I thought she was just happy that I was encouraging him. Dinner continued. Then my mom started talking about how lucky I was. She said I had always been good at school and work. She said I had a stable career. She said I had bought a house. She said I had savings. Then she mentioned that Daniel had never gotten the same opportunities. I didn't understand what she meant. We grew up in the same house. We went to the same schools. Our parents paid for both of us to attend community college. I had paid for the rest of my education myself. Daniel dropped out after one semester. I told her that everyone had different paths. She nodded. Then she said something about how I shouldn't make Daniel feel bad about where he was in life. I remember feeling confused. Nobody had been talking about Daniel's failures. I had literally just gotten promoted. I hadn't bragged. I hadn't compared myself to him. I hadn't even posted about it online. I told her I wasn't trying to make him feel bad. She said she knew that. Then she started talking about humility. I laughed because I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. My mom looked directly at me and told me to stop showing off my success because my brother deserved this chance. For a few seconds, I didn't even understand what she was asking me to stop doing. I asked what exactly I had done. She said I knew what she meant. I told her I really didn't. Then she explained that Daniel needed a chance to prove himself. She said my promotion was making everyone focus on me. She said it would be easier for him to get a good job if I wasn't constantly reminding people of what he hadn't accomplished. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I told her that if Daniel needed me to fail so he could succeed, then she should ask him why. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry yet. I was just confused. My mom reached for her phone. I remember that movement more clearly than almost anything else that happened that night. She picked it up from beside her plate and unlocked it. My dad immediately noticed. He asked what she was doing. She said she was handling something. Daniel looked uncomfortable. That was the first time I really looked at him. He wasn't surprised by what my mom had said. He looked nervous. I asked him whether he knew what she was talking about. He didn't answer directly. He said I was making things bigger than they were. That bothered me more than my mom's comment. I asked him whether he had applied for a position at my company. He said no. I asked whether he had applied for a position with one of our major vendors. He said no again. I asked why he was looking at operations jobs if he didn't have the experience. He said he had been talking to people. My mom told me to leave it alone. That made me even more suspicious. I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know whether Daniel had actually done something wrong. I didn't know whether my mother was simply trying to help him. I didn't even know what she meant by him needing me to fail, so I stopped talking. I finished dinner. I paid the bill. I hugged my dad. I gave my mom a quick hug because I didn't know what else to do. Daniel left before us. The whole drive home, I kept replaying the conversation. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. My mom had always been protective of Daniel. Maybe she was just frustrated. Maybe Daniel had told her something privately. Maybe he was embarrassed about being unemployed again. Maybe I had accidentally made him feel inadequate. I didn't want to assume the worst. That night I went through my email. There was nothing unusual. Then I checked my work messaging account. There was one message from my boss that I had not noticed earlier. It said congratulations again and reminded me that the official promotion announcement would go out Monday morning. I thought about Daniel. Then I thought about my mom reaching for her phone. I didn't sleep very well. The next morning, Daniel sent me a message. He said he was sorry about dinner. He said Mom had gotten emotional. He said he didn't want us fighting. I told him I didn't want that either. Then I asked him whether there was something he needed to tell me. He didn't respond for several hours. When he finally did, he said he was trying to get his life together. I told him I hoped he did. Then he asked whether I could recommend him for a position. I stared at the message for a long time. I asked what position. He said he wasn't sure yet. That was strange. I told him I couldn't recommend someone for a job without knowing the job. He said I was being difficult. I didn't answer. Monday morning, the promotion announcement went out. My boss sent it to the department. Several coworkers congratulated me. My phone buzzed constantly for the first hour. Around lunchtime, my mom sent me a message saying she hoped I wasn't making a big deal out of the promotion. I didn't respond. That afternoon, my boss asked me to stop by his office. He closed the door. He said there had been an odd conversation with someone over the weekend. I immediately felt my stomach drop. He told me that a man had contacted one of our managers asking about an opening in our department. The man had identified himself as my brother. My boss didn't know much about him. He said Daniel had mentioned that I was his brother and that I could vouch for him. I told my boss I hadn't agreed to do that. He said he understood. Then he asked me directly whether Daniel had ever worked for us. I said no. He asked whether I had ever supervised him. I said no. He asked whether there was any reason the company should consider him for a management position. I said only if he met the qualifications like anyone else. My boss nodded. Then he told me something that made the entire dinner suddenly feel different. Daniel had apparently told the manager that our family was under financial pressure and that my promotion had made it possible for me to help him get into the company. My boss said he hadn't believed it, but he wanted me to know because he didn't want a family issue turning into a workplace issue. I thanked him. I went back to my office and shut the door. For the first time, I felt genuinely angry. I called my mom. She didn't answer. I called Daniel. He answered. I asked him why he had contacted my company. He said he had only asked about openings. I reminded him that my boss had told me he had specifically mentioned me. Daniel said that was normal because I was his brother. I asked whether he had told them that I would vouch for him. He said he assumed I would. That was the moment I realized something. He wasn't asking me for help. He was assuming I owed him access. I told him I would not recommend him for a management position he wasn't qualified for. He got angry. He said I was trying to keep him down. I told him that wasn't true. He said everyone in the family knew I had changed since getting promoted. I asked what that meant. He ended the call. That evening, my mom called me. She said I had embarrassed Daniel. I told her he had contacted my employer and made claims about me without asking. She said he was desperate. I told her desperation didn't give him permission to use my name. She said I needed to think about family. I said I was thinking about family. I was thinking about why family apparently meant I had to damage my own reputation. She became quiet. Then she told me Daniel was going through a hard time. I said I understood. She said I didn't. I didn't argue. I just told her I needed some space. For the next 2 weeks, things were strangely quiet. Daniel stopped messaging me. My mom sent occasional texts about normal things. My dad called me once to ask how work was going. Nobody mentioned the dinner. I thought maybe the situation had settled down. Then I received a letter from my bank. It was not a normal statement. It was a notification about an attempted change to information connected to one of my accounts. I called the bank. After verifying my identity, the representative explained that someone had attempted to obtain information about my account. The request had been denied. The name associated with the request was my mother. I felt sick. My first reaction was to defend her. I thought maybe she had accidentally given the wrong information. Then I remembered the dinner. I remembered her reaching for her phone. I asked the bank whether she had any authorization on my account. They said no. I immediately changed my passwords. I removed old recovery information. I enabled additional verification. Then I checked my credit report. There was nothing suspicious. That should have made me feel better. Instead, I became more nervous. I started going through old financial paperwork. I had helped my parents with some bills over the years. I had once added my mother as an authorized user on a credit card because she needed to make a purchase while traveling. I had removed her years earlier. I wondered whether some old information was still connected. I called the credit card company. They confirmed she was no longer authorized. I asked whether there had been any recent attempts to access the account. There had, 2 attempts. Both were declined. I didn't know what to think. I called my dad. He sounded surprised. He said Mom probably had a reason. I asked him whether he knew what that reason was. He said no. Then he asked me whether I had considered that maybe Daniel needed money. I asked why that would involve my accounts. He didn't have an answer. A few days later, I went to my parents' house. I didn't go there to fight. I wanted answers. My mom was in the kitchen. My dad was watching television. Daniel was there too. That immediately made me uncomfortable. I told them I had questions about the bank situation. My mom became defensive. She said she hadn't done anything wrong. I asked why she had attempted to access my account. She said she had been trying to find information because she was worried about Daniel. I asked why she hadn't asked me. She said she knew I would say no. That answer stayed with me, not because it surprised me, because it confirmed something. She already knew I wouldn't agree. She simply believed that didn't matter. I asked Daniel whether he knew about it. He said he didn't. My mom said he had nothing to do with it. I told her I hadn't accused him. She said the whole family was tired of me acting like everyone was against me. I said I wasn't acting that way. I was reacting to things that had actually happened. My dad finally stepped in. He said everyone needed to calm down. I agreed. Then I asked one question. I asked why Daniel needed me to fail. Nobody answered. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. Daniel eventually admitted he had been trying to get a management job. He said he had talked to someone connected to my company. He said he had also applied for a position at a vendor. I asked whether he had used my name. He said he had mentioned that I worked in the industry. I asked whether he had told them I could help him. He said maybe. I asked whether he had told them I was willing to step aside from certain opportunities. He looked at my mother. I noticed. My mother immediately said that wasn't what happened. I asked Daniel again. He wouldn't answer. I left. On the drive home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt stupid. I had spent my entire adult life believing that because my family loved me, they would never intentionally put me in a bad position. I realized those were 2 different things. People can love you and still make terrible decisions that hurt you. That doesn't make the hurt less real. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't want to sue my family. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to know what I needed to protect. The lawyer reviewed the bank issue and the messages I had saved. He told me to document everything. He advised me not to make accusations I couldn't prove. He advised me to keep communication in writing whenever possible. He also told me to review my credit accounts, property records, and beneficiary information. I went home and did exactly that. That's when I found something I hadn't expected. My mother had been listed as a beneficiary on one of my older retirement accounts. I had added her when I was 25. I had completely forgotten about it. My current retirement account had my mother listed too. I had assumed my wife was listed. She wasn't. That mistake scared me more than anything else. I changed the beneficiary designations. I also updated my emergency contacts and reviewed my life insurance. None of those changes were dramatic, but they made me realize how much of my adult life I had been managing on autopilot. A week later, Daniel called. He sounded different, less angry, more tired. He admitted that he had been trying to get a job through my network. He said he believed I was making enough money that helping him would barely affect me. I asked him why he thought that. He said Mom had told him I had plenty of money. That hurt, not because I cared about being rich. I wasn't rich. I had a mortgage, I had bills, I had retirement contributions. I had spent years saving, but apparently from the outside, the result looked effortless. Daniel said he felt like everyone saw me as the successful son and him as the disappointment. I told him I was sorry he felt that way. I also told him I couldn't fix it for him. He said Mom believed I could. I asked him whether he believed that too. He didn't answer. Then he admitted that he had asked our mother to talk to me. I asked what he wanted her to ask. He said he wanted me to recommend him. I asked whether he was qualified. He said not yet. I told him that was the problem. He said he thought I could get him an interview anyway. I told him I couldn't. He asked whether I would at least give him some money. I said I wasn't going to keep financing a career plan that he hadn't actually made. He got quiet. Then he apologized. That was the first apology I believed, not because it fixed anything, because it was the first time he seemed to understand that I was a person rather than a resource. For a while, I thought that might be the end of it. Then I got a call from my employer's human resources department. They asked me to attend a meeting. I immediately assumed Daniel had contacted someone again. I was right. He had submitted an application for a position at one of our facilities. The application itself wasn't the problem. He was allowed to apply. The problem was that he had listed me as a professional reference without asking. HR wanted to know whether I was comfortable being contacted. I said no. They removed me from the application. Then they asked whether I wanted to report the issue. I said no. I didn't want to turn my brother into an HR case. I simply wanted my name removed. My boss supported that decision. He told me I had handled the situation correctly. That mattered to me because I had spent weeks wondering whether I was being too harsh. A few days later, my mother called me crying. She said Daniel had been rejected. I asked from where. She said a company in our industry. I knew immediately what she meant. She blamed me. She said my refusal to help had ruined his opportunity. I told her I had not contacted the company. She said they knew he was my brother. I told her that wasn't my fault. She said I could have helped him. I said I had offered to help him build a resume. I had offered to review applications. I had offered to explain what employers were looking for. I had never promised him a job. She said that wasn't enough. I remember sitting at my kitchen table while she talked. My dinner was getting cold. I had worked the next morning. I had an early meeting. And yet I stayed on the phone because part of me still wanted her to understand. Eventually, I told her I loved her. I also told her I wasn't going to sacrifice my career to protect Daniel from the consequences of his choices. She hung up. The next month was probably the strangest month of my life. My dad became more distant. My mom stopped speaking to me. Daniel stopped asking for money. I thought that meant things were improving. Then Thanksgiving came around. We had agreed to meet at my parents' house. I almost didn't go. My wife convinced me that avoiding every family event wasn't going to solve anything, so I went. The first hour was surprisingly normal. My dad made jokes. My aunt asked about my new position. I helped set the table. My mother barely looked at me. Daniel arrived late. He seemed nervous. After dinner, my mother asked everyone to sit down. I immediately knew something was wrong. She had a folder. She said she wanted to clear the air. She explained that Daniel had been struggling. She explained that I had been successful. She said she believed family should help family. Then she pulled out several pages. They were printouts of messages between me and Daniel. Some were years old, most were harmless. There were messages where I had mentioned money. There were messages where I had said I was busy. There were messages where I had refused to lend him money. My mother presented them as evidence that I had abandoned him. I felt embarrassed, not because the messages proved anything, because she had gone through them looking for a case against me. I asked Daniel whether he had given them to her. He said no, then he looked at the floor. My mother said she had access to his phone. I asked why she had been reading our messages. She said she was his mother. I didn't argue. I told her that none of those messages changed what had happened. She said I was being selfish. My dad finally asked what exactly she wanted from me. She said she wanted me to help Daniel financially for 1 year. She wanted me to cover his rent while he looked for a better job. She also wanted me to help him get a vehicle. I said no. The room went silent. My mother started crying. She said I had money. I told her I had a mortgage. She said my new salary was more than enough. I told her she didn't know my finances. She said she knew enough. That sentence stuck with me. She knew enough to believe I owed my brother, but she didn't know enough to understand what I had sacrificed to build my life. I left before dessert. On the drive home, I realized something. The promotion wasn't the real problem. My promotion had simply made the family system visible. As long as I was doing well quietly, I could help Daniel occasionally without anyone questioning it. The moment my success became public, everyone could see that I had more than him, and once they saw that difference, they decided the difference was unfair. I didn't know how to fix that, so I stopped trying. I continued working. I continued saving. I continued paying my bills. I didn't post about my salary. I didn't brag about my job. I didn't talk about Daniel to coworkers. I kept every communication with my family respectful. I also kept records, not because I wanted to build a case against them, because I had learned that memory is unreliable when people are emotional. Then, 6 months after the promotion dinner, something happened that finally explained why my mother had reached for her phone that night. I received a letter from an insurance company. There had been an inquiry regarding my life insurance policy. The inquiry had been made by someone claiming to be assisting with family financial planning. The request had been rejected. I called the insurance company. They told me they couldn't provide every detail, but they confirmed that someone had attempted to obtain information about the policy. I immediately thought of my mother. I asked whether the request had come from her. They couldn't tell me. I contacted my lawyer. He told me to preserve the letter and request a complete activity history. I did. A week later, I received the records. The request had been made using information that only a few people would know. My mother knew some of it. Daniel knew some of it. I still couldn't prove which one had done it. I didn't accuse either of them. Instead, I sent my mother a short message telling her that I was aware someone had attempted to access my financial information. I said I didn't want to fight. I simply wanted everyone to understand that I had secured my accounts. She never responded. Daniel did. He said he was sorry. Then he told me something that changed how I saw the entire situation. He said Mom had been telling him for months that I was going to leave him behind. He said she had convinced him that if I kept moving forward, he would never catch up. He said she believed my promotion should have been used to create an opportunity for him. I asked him whether she had told him I needed to fail. He said she had used different words. But yes, that was essentially what she believed. Daniel said he had been embarrassed about it. He said he had gone along because he wanted to believe there was an easier way to fix his life. He admitted that he had contacted people in my industry. He admitted that he had used my name. He admitted that he had told Mom things I had said privately. He also admitted that he had asked her to help him financially. That explained the bank attempts. It didn't prove she had made them, but it explained why she had been desperate. Daniel said he wanted to apologize. I told him I appreciated it. Then I asked whether he had found work. He said yes. He had taken a warehouse supervisor job. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay what my job paid, but he had kept it for several months. I told him I was proud of him. He started crying, so did I. That was the first time in months that I felt like my brother was back. Not the version of him everyone wanted to rescue. Just Daniel, a guy who had made mistakes and was finally trying to fix them. He told me he had stopped asking Mom for money. He said he was paying his own rent. He said he was saving for a used car. I told him that was exactly what he needed to do. We started talking again, slowly. We didn't become inseparable overnight. There were still awkward moments. There were still things we didn't discuss. But the relationship began to heal. My mother was different. She remained convinced that I had betrayed the family. My dad tried to mediate. Eventually, he admitted privately that he had known about some of the conversations between Mom and Daniel. He hadn't realized how far it had gone. He apologized for staying quiet. I told him I understood why he had. That didn't mean I wasn't hurt. We spent several months barely speaking. Then my dad had a minor health scare, nothing life-threatening. He had to spend a couple of nights in the hospital for observation. I visited him after work. My mother was there. For the first time in a long time, she and I were alone in the hospital hallway. She looked tired. Older somehow. She told me she was sorry. I didn't know what she meant at first. Then she explained. She said she had convinced herself that helping Daniel meant taking something from me. She said she had started seeing my success as proof that she had failed him. She said she had been trying to correct that. She admitted she had crossed lines. She said she regretted trying to access my financial information. I asked whether she had actually done it. She said she had tried. That was the first clear admission I ever got. She said she hadn't intended to steal anything. She had wanted to know whether I had enough money to help Daniel. I told her that wasn't her decision to make. She agreed. I asked why she had reached for her phone at dinner. She laughed sadly. She said she had been texting Daniel because she wanted him to know she was going to handle the situation. I had spent months wondering what that movement meant. It turned out it wasn't some dramatic secret. It was simply the beginning of something that had already been happening behind my back. That was almost harder to accept. There had never been one mastermind plan. There had been dozens of small decisions, a phone call, a message, an application, a request for information, a conversation I wasn't part of, a mother trying to protect her son, a son trying to avoid admitting he was struggling, a father avoiding conflict, and me assuming that because everyone loved each other, nobody would cross a serious line. I was wrong. Love doesn't automatically make people reasonable. Family doesn't automatically make people fair, and being successful doesn't make you responsible for fixing everyone else's life. My mother and I eventually started speaking again. It took a long time. I set boundaries. I told her she could ask me for help. She couldn't access my accounts. She couldn't contact my employer. She couldn't speak for me professionally. She couldn't use my finances as family property. She agreed. There were setbacks. Once she asked Daniel whether I could help him with a car. Daniel told her to ask me herself. She didn't. That was progress. My dad and I became closer. Daniel kept his job. About a year after the promotion, he received a small raise. He called me to tell me. He sounded genuinely proud. I was proud too, not because he was making more money, because he had done it himself. He had finally stopped waiting for someone else to open a door. As for me, I kept the promotion. I eventually bought the company vehicle arrangement out of my compensation package and started saving more aggressively. I refinanced my mortgage when rates made sense. I increased my retirement contributions. I updated my will. I separated every financial account. I stopped assuming that old paperwork would take care of itself. I also learned something uncomfortable about myself. I had spent years believing that being the responsible son meant quietly absorbing problems. If Daniel needed money, I helped. If my parents needed something, I helped. If someone was upset, I tried to fix it. I thought that was maturity. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was just avoidance. I had been afraid that saying no would make me a bad son or a bad brother, so I said yes too often. The promotion forced me to learn the difference. I don't hate my mother. I don't hate Daniel. I don't even think my family is uniquely dysfunctional. Honestly, I think a lot of families have some version of this. One child becomes the responsible one. Another becomes the one everyone worries about. The responsible child gets praised, but also quietly expected to sacrifice. The struggling child gets protected from consequences. Eventually, somebody gets resentful. In my family, that resentment finally became impossible to ignore. The strangest part is that if my mother had simply asked me for help, I probably would have helped. If she had told me Daniel was struggling, I would have listened. If she had asked me to review his resume, I would have done it. If she had asked whether I knew of any openings, I would have looked. What I couldn't accept was the idea that my success needed to be reduced so his life could improve. I didn't need him to fail. I didn't need to be the successful one. I just wanted both of us to be okay. The promotion dinner happened more than a year ago now. I still remember the exact feeling I had when my mother told me to stop showing off. At the time, I thought she was asking me to be humble. Now I understand she was asking me to make myself smaller. Those are not the same thing. Humility is knowing that your success doesn't make you better than anyone else. Making yourself smaller so someone else doesn't feel insecure is something completely different. I wish I had understood that sooner. I also wish I had asked Daniel what was really going on instead of assuming he was simply being lazy. He was embarrassed. He was scared. He had convinced himself that everyone was moving forward without him. That doesn't excuse what he did. But understanding it helped me stop treating him like an enemy. Today, Daniel and I have a much better relationship than we did before the dinner. We still don't talk about money very much. I think that's healthy. He has his own apartment now. He has his own savings account. He bought a used car with cash. He hates the car, which he reminds me about regularly. But he bought it himself. My mom still occasionally slips into old habits. Whenever she does, I remind her of the boundaries. She doesn't always like them, but she respects them more than she used to. My dad jokes that our family has become much better at paperwork. He's probably right. We keep copies of important documents. We don't share passwords. We don't assume someone else knows what is going on. And nobody in my family has access to my finances unless I intentionally give it to them. I don't consider that sad. I consider it healthy. The funny thing is that my promotion ended up being exactly what my mother was afraid it would be. It changed the family. Just not in the way she expected. It forced us to stop pretending that everything was fine. It forced Daniel to take responsibility. It forced my mother to confront how far she was willing to go to protect him. It forced my dad to stop avoiding conflict. And it forced me to understand that being dependable doesn't mean being available for exploitation. I still remember sitting at that dinner table. I remember the food getting cold. I remember my father looking confused. I remember Daniel avoiding eye contact, and I remember my mother reaching for her phone. At the time, I thought that was the moment everything changed. Looking back, I think everything had already changed. That was simply the first moment I noticed. I never asked my mother to choose between her sons. I never asked Daniel to apologize publicly. I never exposed anyone. I never tried to ruin their lives. I just stopped cooperating with something that was hurting me. I kept records. I protected my accounts. I spoke honestly. I let other people see the facts for themselves, and eventually the truth became too obvious for anyone to keep pretending it wasn't there. The promotion itself was great. The raise helped. The better benefits helped. The office was nice. But the real thing I gained from that promotion was something I didn't expect. I learned that I could love my family without carrying them. I could support my brother without financing his choices. I could respect my mother without giving her control over my life. And I could be proud of something I had worked for without apologizing for it. I still celebrate my promotion every year, not with a huge dinner. Usually I just take my wife somewhere nice and we order whatever we want without checking the prices first. The first year, I couldn't do that without thinking about my family. The second year, I barely thought about it. This year, I realized I was actually happy, not because I had won. There was never really a competition. I was happy because my brother was doing better, my parents were learning to respect boundaries, and I was finally comfortable with the life I had built. And I think that was the part my mother couldn't see that night. I wasn't showing off. I was celebrating. There is a difference. I just wish I hadn't needed a family crisis to learn it.